Hey everybody, welcome to D&D Beyond Weekly. I'm not Amy Dallin, I'm Joe. I'm the content manager here at Phantom Tabletop and D&D Beyond. I'm also a jerk. I gave Amy Dallin a crushing amount of work this week. So she's not allowed to do fun things like stream because I'm a terrible boss. Today, we're talking about advice for DMs that have a new player at the table. Just, like totally green, it's never rolled dice, might not even be sure about this whole fantasy thing, like just green players, and advice for DMs in making the best experience possible for them. And by we, I mean me and Saige Ryan. Hey, Saige, welcome back to the show.
Hi, I'm Saige Ryan, and I miss Amy Dallin.
I do too. I honestly, I feel like you've been robbed a little bit of an Amy Dallin experience.
Hey, we used to do this all the time.
Yeah, you know what? We did. We've got our rapport. Who needs the best host working when you've got several inside jokes with me, Joe Starr. So thank all of you for being here. If it's your first time with us and you're like, I don't know what D&D Beyond is, D&D Beyond is like a digital companion that if playing D&D seems very like overwhelming to you because there's like stacks of books and 65 dice and there's there's like confusing looking character sheets and grids and pencils, and you're like, meh, I don't have time for all that mess. The D&D Beyond's a digital tool set and companion that makes it super easy to jump in and play. This is a show attached to D&D Beyond where we talk about D&D. Welcome, you're caught up. Before we jump in, hey, you're watching on Twitch right now, make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel. Not only do the VODs of this drop there so that you can watch them later, but we also just announced, I'm very excited about this, the Battle for Beyond. 3 words that I have been waiting 8 months to say out loud on this channel.
That's so exciting.
I'm very, very stoked. I talked to you about this in the Frozen section at a Trader Joe's on the phone months ago.
That's true.
So very excited that you were here. Full circle, Saige Ryan. It's a 6-episode miniseries launching November 12th, DM'd by the one and only Jasmine Bular. We are announcing cast members all week on Twitter. You're not going to want to miss the show. It's great. I'm so excited. But for now, we are focused on new player advice for DMs with a new player. Saige, I think we've come up with like a list of like 5, I think, really good pieces of advice for DMs that have a new player at the table. But before we jump into them, what do you feel like? Because I feel like as DMs, there always needs to be like a, how do I want to make the table feel? Like we're the same as show writers or authors in a lot of ways. Am I playing a scary game? Do I want my players to feel tense and like existentially crushed by the end of a session? Do I are we going like straightforward like high fantasy, and we want them just like dramatically spouting poetry by the end of the night? How do you want a new player, totally green to D&D, to feel once they've finished up their first game? Like, what's that ideal? They walk away like, oh.
I think that the key word for me in that would be invested is the main thing. I want them to feel invested in the storyline, either that was told in a one shot or that we've now given them the first piece of. And I want them to feel invested in their own character's place in it too. If they left a table feeling like they were important to this, I think that really sets up for what their future in Dungeons and Dragons can be. it can apply to any genre. It can apply to any level of chill to really, really intense. You have to have a level of self-importance for your character in this world to really invest and want to come back in and make the choices then that you're important enough to affect that world. I can make big decisions because my character is important here. Whether you're
Mhm.
a hero or a villain or just a random bard at a bar, if you have been given that agency to really affect the world, I think that that will bring you back for more games.
You could not have a sexy beach volleyball game set up Spike better for my first little thing.
Let's
Yes,
go,
it's
beach
like you and I have
episode.
done this before. Let's go on the beach playing outside today. Um, uh, my first sort of piece of advice is for that new player, just piggybacking off of how Sage sort of talked about how she wants folks to feel at the end of a game, is give them those hero moments. Go out of the way to give them those hero moments, those 2 to 3 major moments where a player really feels like they've contributed. I do a fair amount of games for almost entirely new players every month, and this is I think this is the big one. Not only to make sure that they have them, but then once the game is done, make sure you reinforce how great that was and how only they could have done it. I think nothing, especially if a player is a little, in their shell. Sage and I are very used to like turning it up to 11 at a D&D table, and we're in character and we're in it. And but people knew, like, they're not even ready to dip their toe in yet, right? Like they're not even ready to like get near the pool. So if they get there near the pool, like just a little bit, like find the way to give them a hero moment, even if it's a little artificially generated. They don't know that, right? They don't know your crafty DM tricks. Just make that person feel really good, make them feel really rewarded, and make sure that they know that that was a hero moment because they may not even realize they did a thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the praise is a good part of it too. It's not just the moment, but the like, you did it. I I
Yes,
I
yeah,
love to be told I did a good job.
right. Just, I mean, really, in throughout life, really, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
especially yeah, especially, well, because that's, I mean, for us, like, that's kind of the point of the game, right? Is like safely exploring all of like this cool risks, and for a player who is taking a risk just by adjusting their comfort level, trying this, that reward is so cool. I had a player recently who was just like very kind of like quiet, has never done this before, um, and uh, they finally like spoke up, like very sort of soft spoken the whole game. We were playing Icefire Peak, which is my favorite um, new player adventure to run. They were they were confronting the dragon, right? And she out of nowhere like suggested like, hey, what if if we can't communicate with the dragon well because it's a white dragon, so it's just sort of mean and dumb. Um, uh, she threw out something about like I can't remember the exact thing she asked for, but it basically required a nature check, and she was trying to figure out if like dragons communicated with movement, like bees, basically. And in that
That's
moment, like
awesome.
when I hadn't like spoke the entire time, and then she's like, "Do they dance like bees?" Yeah, yeah, they absolutely do. Like roll a nature check, no
Let's
matter
go.
what that nature check is. And then all of a sudden she's like doing the dance that she does at the dragon in her little zoom camera. It was great.
That's amazing.
Completely. And but follow up, right? Like make sure that changes the course of the adventure and make sure that they know it. Um Saige Ryan,
Mhm.
what's your first piece of advice for DMs with the new player at the table?
My first piece of advice for DMs with a new player at the table would be making sure that they understand that you are on the same team. I think that a lot of the time for a new player when you're coming in, there is this like this ongoing joke that experienced players have with each other where the DM's always kind of trying to kill you, and that can be
Mhm.
really, really off-putting and intimidating for a new player. They should know that it is a collaborative storytelling adventure. It is not that somebody is reading you a book of rules and you are following them. It is not someone trying to trick you or trying to trip you up or make sure that you know the rules, but instead it is the two of you, this moment between you and that player working together to tell a story about your character, really.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
making sure that they know that they can comfortably take risks in front of you, and that they're not gonna be punished for it. You should always feel like you are on the same team, and that's what I love about D&D. I'm not a competitive games player in general. I play D&D because I love the collaborative nature of it, and I think that sometimes that, for a lot of tables will just extend to the players, and that really has to extend to the DM to welcome somebody into it.
I think that's, super, super well said. Again, yeah, as, like, not a competitive gamer myself, I've been pwned as a noob way too many times, and it's very stressful and very,
Yeah.
anxiety, driving. Um, yeah, I think that that extends, to communicating with your table a little bit
Mhm.
too, right? Like, just really well, sorry, let me back up the thought. Um I think for people familiar with D&D, maybe, like, that's a given, what you just said. Like, yeah, of course, it's like a collaborative storytelling thing, but, like, someone walking in for the first time probably has 0 frame of reference for this.
No idea.
Maybe they yeah, like, maybe they saw the mention on, like, Stranger Things or something like that,
Yeah,
uh, but otherwise, no frame of reference, maybe no idea, like, what to expect. So, yeah, I think
right.
exactly that, like, make sure that
Or
they
if you're coming
understand, "Hey,
from
we're group."
yeah. If you're coming from, like, a board gaming perspective even. Okay, I've played board games, I've been to game nights, I understand that. It is
Mhm.
often a competitive thing. D&D is unique to that. And, like, in general too, they might be coming in with this idea of, like, a trepidation that their character that they've worked really hard on has so much to lose now. It's their first character. It means the world to them. Let them know that it's safe here, and it should be safe. Also, like, bonus tip, don't kill your new players. Don't do it. Do not kill your new players.
Gave you
Throw
a
out something for
bonus.
them like that.
No, that is a very good little piece of bonus.
Little bonus. Like, you know
Yeah,
that.
a
I
little
know
bit of
you all
bonus.
know that. But, like, just just to clarify.
Yeah,
Just I guess
um,
I guess what that boils down to at the end of the day is be nice to new people. That's really it.
that's the thing.
That's all I'm
Um,
asking.
that hits me with like, okay, second bonus, or we just
Mhm.
make this 7 things and not 5.
The 5 is such a bitey
Uh,
title, Joe.
it really is. Oh, the SEO, it's really good. It's got um, uh, the first thing that tends to happen in a one shot is everyone introducing their characters.
Mhm.
And that's like a first that's like a first big, like, you're being put on the spot moment. Some people might come in for the first time and they're like, "Oh man, I've been waiting for this my entire life." Who knows, right? But a lot of folks are just kind of like, I saw thief and I saw elf and I clicked those things, and yes, they clicked those things because they're using D&D Beyond. Um,
Those
and
are
I and
totally
I and I
okay.
yeah, but right, but that's all they've got, right? My
Mhm.
my character's name is Elf Thief. So really, even in those little moments, like, um, let someone put them towards the end of the introduction line, so that maybe if like your big ringer player, if you're lucky enough to have, say, a Saige Ryan at your table who's just like, I'm this character, here's some dope backstory, I'm already in character, so that they can kind of go, oh, and like see by example, like, oh, that's what this is. Okay, cool, cool, cool. Maybe
Oh
give
my
them a
god,
few
yeah.
people. Yeah,
If you
just
can
in
have
case like
at least
they
one person at the table that's comfortable role playing. Oh my god,
Mhm.
I remember so distinctly the first D&D game I was ever invited to play in was, like, a home game, and I didn't go back for a while, and they were doing, like a Star Wars reskin of D&D, and, like, the people just didn't invest in it, and every single person there was uncomfortable role playing. So they would like say something and then kind of like retract and review it because there wasn't a single person there who was ready to invest in it, and it made everyone nervous. And you could tell everyone wanted to. Each individual person would like start to do a voice and then be like, I don't know, and then I just go over here. And it just
Right? Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
oh god, and it's completely understandable too. Like there's this like natural high school piece of us that's so afraid of like doing something silly and being made fun of because you're doing
Mhm,
it wrong or
mhm.
like the only person there like doing a voice. So if you can have that one person at your table as that's our again, we're bonus tipping, but like if you can have that one person that will be like, "Oh no, I'm doing a voice, I'm doing a bit, I wore a hat,
Yeah.
I'm here."
And yeah, and block it might seem really like specific and nitpicky, but like let them go first, then maybe two more people, and then your new player, just so that they have some time to like go, okay, that's what this is. Now I can make some decisions or not. And if they don't
Right.
make decisions, still totally fine. Is that new player's name Lou? Great. They're playing Lou and make that awesome. Make sure that they know that that is super super cool, super super fun. And that they
Mhm.
didn't screw up by not bringing their hat. Um uh you actually uh, sort of foreshadowed another thought that I had, which is on our official list. This isn't, we're out of bonus territory. Um,
Okay.
and I'm going to go a little out of order um, and say, talk to your other players. Um, uh, I think you really sort of started to nail this. Like, talk to your other players, make sure that they are aware that like your priority one tonight is making sure that that person has a good time. So, if they can even, because if your players are like, "Oh, I totally see the agenda here." Like, they'll help find those heroic moments. They'll help
Yeah.
find those little role-playing opportunities. They'll jump in and get in with you. So, yeah, make sure your players know like, "Hey, tonight I love all of you as well, but tonight is about Lou. Tonight is about
Right.
making sure that Lou has a great time playing a thief."
Yeah, and I think that if you talk to those players too, you might have the opportunity to let one of those players help them kind of build and engage their character. Maybe Lou is, maybe Lou knew someone else because they go to the same tavern beforehand. So when Lou is a little bit
Yeah,
lost and
totally.
doesn't understand when they get asked like, "Oh, where are you from?" Another experienced and seasoned player can step in and kind of fill that in for them or can give them a role play opportunity by engaging in conversation, being like, "Hey, I'm going to try and sneak around the back. Lou, why don't you come with me?" Or, "Hey, I need a rogue for this. I think there might be traps. Lou, why don't you get in here?" So it doesn't always have to be you feeding that, and then they feel more connected to the rest of the
Yeah.
party.
Yeah, no, exactly, exactly. You had another really great thought that I loved.
Thank
Will
you.
you share it with the class?
Yeah. So, my other tip is don't be
I, by the
afraid
way,
to
am the worst
genre.
interviewer.
No, you're not. You're doing great, Joe.
Sage,
Goodness
you were also
gracious.
gonna speak. Will you speak
Sage,
now?
I believe this is the time where you speak. Yeah, so my other tip is don't be afraid to genre bend because like high fantasy is not for everybody, and that's okay. Especially if you're running
Hmm.
like a one shot and the real intention here is
Hmm.
to introduce people, which I find a lot of the time when I am introducing new players to a game, it's like you said, it's about loot today, right? So is today's one shot a heist specifically? Because that might be more interesting to them.
Yeah,
Is it more of, a true high fantasy, we're doing royalty and elves? Does it go into more of a genre of action and adventure or, into, like, romance and storytelling? Do not be afraid to kind of take it out of, either a one shot that you're already running and adjust that accordingly, or pull from like a pop culture influence. Okay, I
yeah,
know that my new player really, really loves. I will use Avatar: The Last Airbender as an example for everything. What can I give them in this world that feels familiar to them in setting to help them invest, right? Or if they're really into sci-fi, okay, can we start talking, let's get really into space. I mean, Spelljammer, I don't know. Let's head in that direction, right?
yeah,
They could be really into monsters. They could be really into something that's a little more like small and towny. So don't be afraid to leave the genre you're comfortable with for their comfort, and it'll test you as a DM too, which is fun.
totally. I think this might be our most important rule of the night because I think yeah, uh cater like hell to this to a new player. Make make them walk out and even if you're really leaning in and you're like, what kind of genres do you like? What movies do you like? What's your favorite show? If you could uh, if maybe if they're a little familiar with D&D, like if there were three things that definitely happened to this adventure, what would you want them to be? Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
right.
beat that stuff out with them, and that
Yeah.
make sure that they come out with like the wedding cake of their dreams, right? Like, why not?
The
This is
tiered perfect
their
wedding cake of
special
their
night.
dreams. I
Yeah,
love
just the
that.
perfect like just like what is the cake that Lou has always dreamed of, and you as a DM can prepare that cake.
Yeah, and if
I
you're there to help them build that character, there's gonna be hints towards that as well, right? Because like,
Mhm,
pretty
mhm,
much every time I build a D&D character, there is a pop culture reference. I'm like, "Oh, she kinda reminds me of blank," or "They're similar to this in energy." And a lot of the time, that's how I
mhm.
communicate is through, like, familiar pop culture references, if I'm trying to get the idea across quickly to something. So if they're like, "Well, I kind of like Cynthia from the Rugrats." I don't know why that's the first character that came to mind, but it is.
I love that it
Then
was.
you're like, "Okay, I understand. Let's go on a mystery." Okay. Everyone is
Yeah,
to
no,
Cynthia.
exactly, and don't be shy from like leaning in to their vibes too. If what you were planning was like, no, this is going to be like a hardcore weird adventure, like don't be afraid to adjust that to like your players' vibes. I uh uh got to play D&D for the first time with that had never played, and they are three very crass let's say horny stoner ladies, and that game still set in the Forgotten Realms, still on the
Mhm.
Sword Coast, and there's a question, but like the vibes of that game are going to be much different than a standard game. And just like lean in, make sure that make sure the world sort of conforms to like that tone and style that they're looking for.
Yes.
Um, yeah, no, I think you nailed it. That's probably the most important rule in here is just really like catering that genre and feel.
Yeah,
Um,
ask what video games they like to play. I don't know.
yes, yes, exactly. Like, yeah, like do they love Castlevania on Netflix? Do they just do they write a lot of Tales fanfic? Like you'll probably become a better storyteller just like incorporating that stuff because you're like, oh, I've never thought of incorporating that angle into what I'm
Yeah,
doing either.
absolutely.
Um,
And it's a nice, like, cheat sheet
yeah.
too. Steal a world.
Yes. Oh
Have
my god.
go for
Yeah.
it.
Steal. Steal, 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 steal.
Just steal.
Last note, uh, and I think that this one relies on talking to the rest of your table a little bit. Bless you, Sage Ryan.
Thank you.
Bless you, my friend. Um, uh, 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 screw the rules.
Ah,
They,
screw the rules.
who cares? They suck. Nobody needs
Rule
them.
of
Um,
cool.
Yes. Um, and I wrote this one down, and this one goes hand in hand with like also make sure the rest of your table knows that you're going to be real loose with the rules with that person, and don't worry about it. Um, and this was like the one that I wrote down because I was playing a game recently. Again, it was like a mix of people that I've been playing with fairly regularly and some new folks, right? And they were this is not Ice Spire Peak. This is Lost Mine of Fendelver, or as I like to call it, Pehandelver. Um, but they were in a mine investigating some drow, and there's like an underground lake. And one of our new players, who was playing a druid, um, has never played. Had been, somewhat participating, right? But like all of a sudden spoke up and they were like, I have a thing called wild shape. And I was like, yeah. And so she was like, what if I turn into a very long whale and everyone can just use me as a bridge? And I could see like a few of my like players that I had been playing with in this little like series kind of going like,
Watch
ah,
him and be like,
and I just
"No, it's
very
fun
quickly
creating." Yeah.
yeah, I just very quickly like individually message them on Zoom like it's fine. It's fine. You have a whale bridge now. Um like I want her desperately to have a hero moment. Like I don't want this player to
Mhm.
and eventually of course if they're like, okay, I'm in every month, I'm in every week, whenever it is you're playing games, then you can start building that stuff in. I'm not saying, like go crazy for good, but when it comes to that first week experience, like they're not going to remember uh rules or interesting game mechanics. They're going to remember that time that like their friends are going to be like, "What'd you do on Friday?" And they're going to be like, "I turned into a whale bridge and I saved the day." You know?
And it was awesome. Yeah, absolutely, and I think
Yeah.
there's such a difference too, and I think there's a lot of things that new players will do when it's just creative, and it's a lot of the time more creative than, like, I who
Mm,
know the rules so deeply at this point and know what my constraints are sometimes. Sometimes I'll forget to, like, get creative with it because 'cause I'm like, "Actually, I know that if I twin spell this, I'm golden and I'll make this happen. I'll use this as a bonus action and I'm good to go." But there's a difference between, like, "Actually, I'd like to be a giant whale and I'd like to eat all of the enemies, and then it's done," and like, I want to use it as a bridge. This thing where it's like, hey, you're not, completely
mhm.
just enveloping the challenge out of it. You've done something so creative that it is worth letting it go. It is more
Yeah,
creative than it is
exactly.
OP
Yep.
at
And
the end of the day.
even if they are like, what if I turn into a whale and I consume all these enemies? Like,
Maybe.
I want to I'll figure out some dice mechanics. I'm not going to
Yeah, right?
give them all of it. I'll figure something out, right?
You can always make it happen, I think, where it's like, okay, my thing is always if you can describe to me how you do it, then you can do it. And that'll also get them
Mhm.
speaking too. It'll get them past just that, like, I'd like to do this. Silent. It's okay. How do you do it? Explain to me how
Yes.
you're gonna get
Oh,
across there, how you're gonna get down there, what it's gonna look like.
you just got us to a third phenomenal piece of bonus advice, Sage Ryan.
Bonus
Um,
advice.
thank God these are pieces of bonus advice, and that we've kept it
Do not.
5 pieces of
It's
advice. Do
5
not go
tips.
to 8. Do not go to 8. It is 5. Top 5. That's what YouTube wants. Um, but that's asking them to describe things. It's a DM tip we kick around all the time, but I don't think we keep it on the table for new players or think about it for new players. Like, what a great way to get someone talking to like, okay, we just walked into this old armory. You know,
Mhm.
tell me what it looks. What do you think it looks like?
Yeah.
Yeah, even if they're just like, it's dark. Even if they're still a little shy,
Right.
it's yeah, they're still participating. They're still getting stuff out
Mhm.
there. You can then take that one little piece of information that they've given you and make it huge. Like you can,
Yeah.
yeah,
Or, like, ask them to customize spells too. If they're playing a warlock and they have an Eldritch Blast, what does your Eldritch Blast look like? What's specific to
yeah,
yours? And any of those spells. If you're using lightning, you're using, like, thorn whips or things like that. What does it look like for your character that's special? I have a character that I play and, like, she everything sparkles and that's just a bonus thing. So her Eldritch Blast has like a pink tinge to it and it sparkles upon impact like a firecracker. And that's a cool thing that they get to customize that's not in the rules and it doesn't matter if it doesn't look how it's supposed to. It's a fun thing they got to do. It's
yep,
like how Cosmo
yeah,
and Wanda,
100%.
everything that they do is either pink or green.
Yep,
Sorry, I'm all
yeah,
cartoon
no,
references today.
no, you are completely fine. No, like, take me on this Nick in the Afternoon journey because I'm very
I don't know
very
what
here for
happened.
this Nicktoon trip. Um,
I love
now
that
I'm just
not
thinking
halfwing
about
in the
Nicktoon
chat said,
references.
pink and sparkly like children's toothpaste. It's
Yeah,
great.
so yeah, make your D&D game a little more like children's toothpaste,
That's it.
right? No, that's
It's
not
not a
working, I
6th
don't think.
tip.
I'm sorry.
That's not a 6th tip.
No, it is not. Yeah, yeah.
It's the summary of the
Uh-uh.
5 tips.
Yeah, exactly. Um, just opening up the chat here to see if anybody had some thoughts or some
Oh, we had a
feelings.
bunch of questions coming in. I've been
Oh,
watching
did
that
we?
chat. We had
Will
so
you
many
be
things
better
going
at Twitch
by.
than me? And did
I
you
would
see
love to
anything
be
that you
better at
dug?
Twitch than you.
Thank
I will
you.
go and find it in just a moment. There was a giveaway in the middle, so there were a lot of messages in between. So there is that, I will say. But if you guys want to like rewrite any of your questions, that would be tight. Also, your mod is telling you that there are questions in Slack.
Are there questions in Slack? Oh, thanks, Halfwing. Let me find them.
A
Hey,
couple of
Sage.
squids said, my favorite phrase as a DM is feel free to paint me a word picture. And I do think that's nice.
I love that. Yeah. Just like, yeah, I love that. It's just like a great way to sort of describe the ask. That makes total sense. Um, yeah. Well, that way you're not putting any pressure on them too. It's kind of like, it's not even like describe this sword. It's like, I don't know, tell me
Mhm.
what's going on. Tell me
Paint me a
what
word
is going
picture.
on. That's really, really cool. Um, hey, I found my thread.
Nice.
Nathan Duel asks, uh, how do I make traveling encounters less boring for a new player?
I tend to like kind of skip around when it comes to travel. I feel like it's like, okay,
Mhm,
you've got 3 days ahead of you. And if you don't have anything particularly like, oh, they have to stop here for this thing. If you've got 3 days that literally just has to be travel, I like to let them summarize that montage style. Okay, you've got, what do you think you would have liked to accomplish over these 3 days? Did you read? Did you have a conversation you really wanted to have with another playing character? Did you write a letter to send out, and let them kind of play out those vignettes that happened along the way without being like, "All
mhm.
right, the rest of the session's this 3-day travel stint. Let's go."
Yeah.
Until you get to
I
the goblins that inevitably stop your cart.
Oh, the goblins. I like I'll tend to choreograph that's I'll keep travel on rails a little bit more
Mm,
for new players. Um unless there's something like very specific about like their character or something like that like, I'm like, "Hey, what would you like to do to sort of impact this trip or whatever?" And then I'll sort of make sure that the rails kind of follow that. But I'll usually just kind of like, "Hey, you guys travel for like a day." Um and then goblins,
and
just to
then
kind of keep
goblins,
things,
naturally.
and then
Yeah.
goblins a little.
I
You know what?
actually Oh, go ahead, please.
I was just gonna. I have never really even played in a game that like did travel just like hardcore. Like
Yeah.
every 10 miles now you got to rest, and now
Oh,
we're gonna
no.
roll an encounter, and you've got 150 miles to go.
Ooh,
I
no.
I kind of want to. I kind of want to.
But that's a seasoned playing table. I
Yes,
had
yes, yeah.
actually one very fun
Not for my new.
experience. Vince Casso, who GMs for me on Failed Save, in one of his games, he did something that I thought was
Hey,
really, really
where
cool.
can people
We had a
find that
pretty
game?
long they can find that on twitch.tv/Pixel Circus. I thank you for asking very much. That's where I play Dungeons and Dragons most of the time. Um, but he did a fun thing where we had a pretty long travel stint to go, and we were on a ship that had a lot of people on it doing various things. And he let us each learn one skill while on that boat, from a various area of it. So it could have been, somebody could have spent that time down in the kitchen and really learned things about cooking. They could have spent time in various things. And there were like tons of different kinds of people that he described being on the boats. So like I came out with a proficiency in like acrobatics, for whatever reason. And that was really cool. I was just like, the fact that we used that travel time and everybody learned one proficiency and a skill was a cool way to bend the rules. And that was a fun travel experience for D&D.
Sweet. Yeah, and you know what? They all remembered that too. I promise you.
Yeah, absolutely. I certainly do.
Yeah, which is super super sweet. Everybody walked away and was like, "Oh yeah, I remember that. That was cool. It was like this boat shit and yeah, that was rad." Um a cup of squids also asked how do you adjust this advice for when you're dealing with more than one new player? Um I don't know if it needs a ton of adjustment. I would
Mhm.
say if as a blanket sort of on top of all of those is fun vibes. rule it becomes like rule number one. Make sure everybody's laughing, having a good time. Um, I wouldn't. This is a case where I wouldn't be quite so stern on table talk. Like cross
Yeah,
chatter and stuff like that. I know that I can get like kind of like if I'm at a table and like like mid combat, someone's like, "Look at this meme." Uh,
yeah.
I can be like, can we really focus on slaying a dragon and playing pretend people? But I think in this case, make sure everybody's having a good time, laughing, having fun. Let that table talk happen. Let everybody poke at each other in a fun way. A little bit. Uh, yeah, I think that would be my blanket over these rules if it's a table full of new folks.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that, and as long as you still have at least an experienced player at your table, I think all of the tips apply.
Yeah. Uh, I have a question for you to answer, Sage Ryan.
Please.
Grizzly
Mhm.
01810 asks, this is kind of a fun question. How do you deal with a new player requesting a dragon encounter right out the gate?
Okay, so that's a bold thing to come into a new game and be like, "I want a dragon," right? You
Immediately.
can't obviously simply accommodate and be like, "Okay, then it's a dragon one shot." Um, I also think it's a fun opportunity to, like, potentially twist their expectations then. Like, I know I just
Hmm,
said you guys are on the same team, but I love the idea of monkeys pawing their dragon. I love the idea of being like, "Great, okay, here's a dragon, and he's the town hero." You've met a dragon. What are your expectations of a dragon? You came here to slay it. This dragon, super tight. What's up with that?
yeah, everybody loves this dude.
Put a dragon in. Find out that the world is not exactly as they picture it, because I think that they have this idea of like, ah, yes, I am a knight wearing armor that's here to slay a dragon. And I think that that'll
Hmm.
introduce them more to like what Dungeons and Dragons is, which is not the thing they saw in Stranger Things or
Yeah.
that one really weird season of Riverdale.
Yeah,
Griffins and
I think
gargoyles,
you're
everybody.
Griffiths and gargoyles. Or if they only saw that '80s Tom Hanks movie, what was it?
Oh
Some
God.
Minotaurs and Mazes, I think.
Yeah,
Myths and Mazes.
something like that.
Um, oh, so good.
That's very,
Uh,
very funny. Yeah. I mean, or
um,
honestly, there's nothing wrong with telling a very traditional D&D story. There's nothing wrong with being like, "All right, we're going to meet a dragon." Sure. Absolutely. But I think that there is something to building the patience of working up to that with a new player.
mhm,
And knowing that combat doesn't happen in the first 5 minutes of the game, and it shouldn't happen in the first 5 minutes of the game for a
yeah,
new player because they're gonna get their butt kicked too. Like, they need time to, like, settle in and sit in and,
yeah.
learn what they're
Are
doing.
there things
Also,
you
Chad
can do
answered mazes
around
and
the dragon?
monsters.
Yeah. Oh, mazes and monsters. Thank you.
There you go.
Also, are there things you can do around the dragon? If you're in the lair,
Mhm.
there's a lot of hiding. There's a lot of stealthing. There's a lot of just like pure survival. If you instead of just pure like Saint George and the Dragon, you want to go a little more Ripley and a xenomorph. Like
Yeah.
there is a dragon after you, and
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, beyond just straight up roll initiative, like what are some fun things you can do with that dragon? Hey, Sage Ryan, any
Hey.
any other thoughts, feelings for these DMs that are doing the Lord's work and bringing new players into the fold?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we appreciate you welcoming in new players, you know? I mean, the first step is to invite somebody new to the table to break down those barriers of gatekeeping. Like, know that, like, I see you and I understand, and I too was picked on in high school. But popularity of Dungeons and Dragons is not a threat to your love for the hobby in any way. It is wonderful that we have more people joining us. And I also think that, like, the tools that we now have as D&D players, we couldn't have if we weren't growing at such a rapid pace as a community, if it wasn't a part of pop culture now, if it wasn't so accessible.
Yep.
Keep inviting new people, keep telling the kind of stories that they wanna play, and yeah, be like Joe, run new games for new players all the time.
Otherwise, don't don't be much like me. But in that sense, yes, 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 yes. Dude, hey, where can people find you? Thank you so much for hanging out.
Yeah, I love being here. You can find me everywhere on the internet at Not Sage. I stream over on my channel, and I also stream on the channel Pixel Circus. It's an independent collaborative channel that I started with a bunch of really incredibly talented friends of mine. We play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. We have an update coming out soon for campaign 2 of Failed Save. We have Princess D&D. We've got all kinds of fun stuff over there. And you can also find me on the D&D channel for the Black Dice Society every Thursday.
All really, legitimately just like
Oh,
really,
and on
really
Smosh games
good,
like all the time.
fun shows. And on Smosh games,
Yeah,
like all
for
the
any
time.
given thing.
Where you where you completely just like ran went the distance on some Avatar trivia.
Oh,
Um,
yes, I
that
did.
was a little
Yeah, I
while
went
ago,
in.
but I just also haven't seen you in a minute. But
Yeah, that's
yeah,
fair. Thank you. I appreciate that. Of course, here I was
meant to tell
referencing
you.
Avatar again.
Yep.
Thank you. That was my knowledge flex. I was like, what is the thing that I know the most about and also that I think the fandom I'm least afraid of?
It was it was a thing to behold. As you are at all times, Saige Ryan, in all
Ah,
of your D&D
stop
glory.
it.
Thank you so much. Oh, stop. Thank you so much for hanging out. Thank all of you so much for hanging out, being a little bit a part of the family. We really appreciate you. It's weird out there. Be safe, be nice to each other. And if, as usual, after all of this, if you're like, that all sounds really cool, I have no one to play this game with, you absolutely do. Go to our Discord, go to our forums at dndbeyond.com. There's always people looking for games. Um, Take that chance. Everyone is just as awkward and feels just as weird about reaching out to other people about doing stuff as you do. So take that chance on yourself. You deserve to play. And we'll see you next time here on D&D Beyond. Thanks, everybody.
It's D&D.